Unfortunately, the way graphics card reviews are generally done, which is native resolution maximum settings to fully stretch the GPU, it can give people the wrong impression about how powerful of a graphics card you need to game above 1080p. For example, if we look at this 5070 testing here in a big Unreal Engine 5 game, this is Oblivion Remastered, we can see that, oh no, at 1080p max settings, the 5070 is not even averaging 60 FPS, and at 1440p, it's like 40 FPS, and at 4K, it's in the mid-20s. It's completely unplayable. And that's true at maximum settings at native resolution. Now, whether you like it or not, or feel like developers are using it as a crutch, the reality of the situation is that upscaling, DLSS, FSR, things like that, are really the way games are being developed for, especially if we're talking games in like Unreal Engine 5 and other big modern engines. So take a look at this. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have 1080p max settings, but on the right-hand side of the screen, we have reduced settings and DLSS performance, but on a 4K output. And if we look at the performance difference right now, we're looking at around 90 frames per second on the 4K image, versus under 60 frames per second on the 1080p image. In other words, there's a lot more to using a graphics card than just turning things to maximum settings at native resolution to decide what makes the most sense. You can see there's a lot of differences in the image. There's a ton more detail on the 4K side of the screen here. If you're on a mobile screen right now, you can pinch to zoom, but you're getting tons more detail on the right-hand side of the screen. Way less detail on the left, and that's because of the resolution difference. Although interestingly, DLSS performance mode with the 4K output actually is rendering at 1080p internally, but then outputting a 4K-like image, and it really is very close to a native 4K using the latest models of DLSS, and FSR4 does a similarly good job. To the point where like monitor resolution doesn't have to be what your game is actually internally rendering at, and yet you capture way more detail in the screen, even if you're internally rendering close to 1080p. Now, again, there's also the difference between maximum settings and medium settings. There's a lot of differences in the lighting here and the effects, etc. But generally medium to high settings in games right now still look quite good, still capture the game's general art style, and run significantly faster. So this video is not just for 5070 owners, this is just trying to capture this kind of general idea where an expensive new graphics card might seem like, oh man, is that really only good for like 1080p? And I'm trying to show, no, there's a lot more flexibility here. Honestly though, I think the sweet spot for most people is gonna be 1440p on most graphics cards. Here, still testing the 5070, we're looking at max settings across the board now, but in what I think is a more appropriate choice for the internal rendering resolution in modern engines like Unreal Engine 5. Because again, for better or worse, I'm not here saying like I love game developers relying on resolution scaling. I'm just saying this is the case. At 1080p using DLSS quality with the latest versions of DLSS actually looks pretty good. 1440p DLSS balanced looks pretty good. And at 4K DLSS performance mode looks pretty good. Again, FSR4, similar results. And if we look at the performance numbers here, this is more like what a 5070 class GPU is capable of on these monitor resolutions when trying to use maximum settings, but again, with a more appropriate choice for internal rendering resolution. And here we can see that max settings in Unreal Engine 5 is still demanding, but the 1080p performance now is at 73 FPS, 1440p is at 63, and the 4K result is still a bit much. We're at 48 FPS average here, which is playable on a controller and variable refresh rate in a single-player title, but again, still probably not what you're looking for. I also want to be 100% clear right now, there is no frame generation involved in any of this testing. Frame generation can be kind of a personal preference, and once you're hitting around the 50 to 60 FPS mark, most people would be okay with turning it on in single-player titles, but you might want to try it out on a game-by-game basis. But I want to be clear that I am not using any frame generation for these performance numbers. All we're doing is adjusting graphics settings. So here, though, again, is the reminder that you don't have to be playing at maximum settings. Now here we're looking at medium, which probably isn't the exact optimal choice for graphics settings in this game, but it's illustrating the point that the graphics settings sliders offer you tons of performance on the table in most games. So again, looking at some big new Unreal Engine 5 game, where at first it seems like the 5070 is not even a 1080p card if you want 60 FPS. Okay, let's pause and look at the performance numbers here again. So 1080p medium settings DLSS quality were close to 150 FPS. If you're on 144 hertz 1080p display, you're pretty much maxing that thing out. But 1440p high refresh rate display, you're also perfectly well at home. 1440p medium settings DLSS balanced, 126 FPS average here. And even on a 4K display, medium settings DLSS performance, we're hitting nearly 90 frames per second. So, and again, this is one of the most demanding big Unreal Engine 5 games that have been released. So again, if you're tuning performance settings, a lot of different monitor resolution choices could make perfect sense. Before we get into monitor recommendations, let's look at one more of the most demanding games released this year that isn't an Unreal Engine 5 game. This is Monster Hunter Wilds. So again, if I move forward in the testing here to where there's been a time to kind of build up the averages a bit, so here is probably the most demanding scene in the test I was running here. And we can see at this moment, at 1080p max settings, we're under 60 FPS, although we've been averaging about 68 FPS. At 1440p native max settings, we're only hitting about 44 FPS in this scene, and we're under a 60 FPS average. And again, at 4K native max settings, we're averaging just barely over 30 FPS, and in this scene, we're under 30 FPS. So again, the 5070 might feel like it's barely a 1080p GPU. Again, this video is not really just about the 5070, it's kind of using it to illustrate a point. Again, that kind of feels where like what you're at. But again, if we use resolution scaling, which I think is appropriate to a game this demanding, big new AAA games, again, leaving at maximum settings, but using the resolution scaling here, we can now see in this exact same scene that the 5070 is averaging 78 FPS. It's momentary in this most difficult part of my test is still over 60 FPS at 64. On the 1440p max settings, but with DLSS balanced, we're now averaging 69, which is pretty nice, although this momentary scene drops slightly below 60. On a variable refresh rate display, it's going to smooth it out pretty well. But again, on the 4K display, we're still averaging a little below 60 FPS. Playable on a variable refresh rate display for single player stuff, but again, on the 4K screen especially, you'd probably want to turn down graphics settings. So then let's actually do that. We'll look at the medium settings as well, kind of jump to that same sort of point in the benchmark run. For comparison, so this is now medium settings, and with the upscaling running, jumping down to the same scene, kind of we'll freeze it here. We can see now that medium settings DLSS quality at 1080p, we're averaging almost 100 frames per second, and even in this most demanding area, we're well into the mid-80s. 1440p medium settings DLSS balanced, we're averaging in the mid-80s, and in this most demanding scene at about 75. And at 4K even, we're averaging well over 60 FPS at 67, and this most demanding scene is still holding about 60. So what is my point in all of this? Because I know not everybody watching this video has a 5070. The 5070 is not really the point. The point is that I really think that monitor resolution can be a lot more flexible than people think. The two games I've looked at here are pretty much the worst case scenario performance-wise from what we've seen this year. There's others that are similarly bad. I could look at Borderlands 4, etc. But the point is that these are some of the most demanding, you could say least optimized games out there right now. And honestly, at the right settings, a $500-ish GPU can really handle 4K, 1440p, or 1080p. Although I think we would agree that even when you're turning down settings and using resolutions, the 4K monitor is usable, but maybe not ideal if you're looking for those higher refresh rate experiences. So if you're looking for what monitor should you buy, you do need to think about the resolution. And I think that for most people, 1440p is going to be the sweet spot, especially if you're at like 5070, RTX 5070 level of performance or below. I think 1440p is the sweet spot. I think that if you're buying a new monitor, 1080p is actually probably lower than you need to go. Even if you're on much weaker GPUs than these, even an RTX 3060 can do okay using upscaling on a 1440p display, right? So I really think that if you're buying a new display, buying into 1440p makes a lot of sense right now. And if you're still on a 1080p display and you're just not interested in upgrading your monitor right now, I think that's perfectly fine. But monitor prices have come down quite a bit on 1440p displays, so I really think that it makes a lot of sense to buy in here and rely on things like DLSS or FSR4 in order to reach these performance levels. So if you're on an older GPU, especially an older AMD GPU that doesn't have FSR4 support, you're stuck to like FSR2 or 3, or if you're on an older like GTX card from NVIDIA, that's where I don't think necessarily buying the higher resolution monitors makes sense. But if you're on anything RTX capable from NVIDIA or AMD's 9000 series GPUs, or if you're watching this in the future or higher, where FSR4 is available and DLSS is available, I really think buying into 1440p is probably the sweet spot for most people. And if you're on a GPU more powerful than a 5070, it starts to smooth out the 4K experience. So I would say 5070 Ti or higher from NVIDIA, or on the AMD side, like a 9070 XT, starts to make sense on a 4K display, although I still personally think that 1440p is the sweet spot. And so I really think I'd recommend most people buy a 1440p display. Anyway, what if you're actually looking for what monitor should you buy? Well, the honest answer is that pricing changes daily, and the specific best monitor in each price class is going to change. I'm also filming this video on Black Friday, so there's particular monitor sales that will be different potentially if you're watching this at a different time. So I'm going to tell you, first of all, that my favorite monitor reviewers are Monitors Unboxed and Ratings, or Artings. I don't actually know if you're supposed to pronounce that as Ratings or Artings. I don't know. Anyway, so usually any monitor that I'm looking at, I'll see if one of these two outlets has reviewed it and see what they say. Also, like Monitors Unboxed has been putting out some best monitors to buy for various resolutions, etc. And I encourage you to watch those videos. I mean, some of my choices here are informed by watching Monitors Unboxed videos. I'm more of a graphics card reviewer than a monitor reviewer. That being said, I've sorted through United States pricing as of today and looked into reviews, and I do have some picks for you. But again, this pricing could change, so it's good to have good monitor resources to look into. So shout outs to these reviewers as good places to look. Now, like I said, for some specific recommendations, I really just don't see the point in buying a 1080p display if you're upgrading a monitor right now. If you're already on a 1080p display, I'm not saying you were dumb for having bought one. I'm just saying if you're buying a new monitor now, you can get pretty respectable specs for $150 or less. One particular example of that that I found today is this ASRock 27-inch 180 hertz IPS. And generally, I think for around $150, there's usually something on sale that'll get you around almost 200 hertz, so this is 180 hertz, and usually you can get a decent IPS, and you can look up specific reviews and make sure that there's no devastating problems with the display. Now, that being said, if you are able to spend more, you can get better picture quality, slightly better features, etc. Like here, if you can go up to $189, this is generally a little bit of a better display here from Asus with the ROG Strix. This one's 27 inches. Again, 1440p, 180 hertz still IPS, but just generally slightly better test results when you look at all the different things like like the image quality stuff, the color accuracy, response times, etc. There's just a little bit better panel for a little bit better money. Currently on a Black Friday sale, making it a pretty good price. If it goes back up to full price, maybe not recommending this particular one, right? Now, if you used to have a little bit more money, jumping up to, under $300, Now you can get even higher refresh rates, so 240 hertz, etc. This LG 27GR83QB. I hate monitor names, geez. Anyway, I'll link these things in the video description. So this one for $279, currently available at that price on a Black Friday sale, does again have pretty good specs here. We're getting, like I said, even better, color accuracy, higher refresh rates, less ghosting, things like that. Now, if you have a higher budget, then OLED monitors are really starting to get pretty exciting around the $500 price point. Currently, there's a Black Friday deal for $550 on the MSI Mag 271 QPX. This is a QD OLED that is 360 hertz. And QD OLED, and just OLED in general, the idea here is the pixels themselves can actually be turned off. So if you've ever played games on like an IPS display, which is probably what most of you have, if you're in a dark scene or there's a black screen, black background, you'll see there's a lot of glow. The black is really gray. OLED screens can turn off those individual pixels so that black is truly black, and this makes HDR have incredible contrast, so it can really pop. Also, there's incredibly fast pixel transitions, so very, very little motion blur, etc., and high refresh stuff, especially on this like 360 hertz. But again, it's $550. I understand this is very expensive, but if you have this in your budget, do remember that I think sometimes people don't think enough about the monitor that they're actually going to be viewing the games on. They spend a lot of money on the PC. Like sometimes people will spend, $1,500, $2,000 on a gaming PC and then buy some like $100 monitor. Do remember that in the end, what your eye actually sees isn't what the computer is rendering, it's what the display is sending to your eyes. So do keep that in mind. Now, I'm not saying everybody should rush out and spend $550 on a monitor. I'm just saying if you do have that budget and you're wondering, is it worth it? I'm a huge OLED fan. I've been converted to them. I've done other videos on OLED. I think I have one that's like OLED ruined me, where you get more of my thoughts on that. Now, I will say, if you do a lot of actual like productivity work on your PC, where you're staring at static web pages, spreadsheets, etc., for multiple hours straight on a regular basis, then OLEDs do still have more of a chance to burn in than other monitor technologies like IPS, etc. So that is still a potential downside. But if most of your use case for your gaming PC is gaming and videos, and then you're still you can be on websites a lot, guys, and it's not going to burn in. But it's just like if you're static, same thing, over and over and over again, like you work from home for 8 hours and then switch to gaming, then it might not be the best choice to go the OLED route. Just throwing that out there. Now, if you're just like, what if I just want to get like the best 1440p monitor? If you go up to $650, there is 500 hertz QD OLEDs now. Just throwing that out there. I think that for most people that's complete overkill. But hey, if you had like another $100 in your budget, this is here, and it is a very impressive monitor. And then some people are wanting the 4K display though. So 4K displays, like I said, they're generally more expensive than their 1440p counterpart. So I really do encourage you that if you're in any of these price categories here, for gaming being your main use case, really consider these 1440p displays. Now, if you do want a crazy good 4K display, you can get some 4K 240 hertz OLEDs for about $750 right now. We got a Black Friday deal right here on this MSI Mag 321 UPX. QD OLED, 4K 240, pretty impressive stuff. Anyway, so those are some particular monitors I think are good examples at various price points. And I think even if you're buying something at this kind of $150 price point, you can, like I said, get some pretty good specs here, have a pretty good experience. But like I said, prices change all the time. I'll link these in the video description. But like I said, big shout out to Monitors Unboxed and Ratings, where I look up a lot of monitor reviews when I'm interested. So you can kind of sort prices, in different price categories, look up reviews, try to get good picks, because it is very, very volatile over time. Hopefully you guys found this video useful and or interesting. I've been getting a bunch of comments and emails asking me for my thoughts on monitors. So I thought I'd have some thoughts on monitors. I do think 1440p is still the sweet spot. You don't need a crazy ridiculously powerful GPU. If you look up my GPU reviews, maybe I've reviewed the card you have. I've reviewed most GPUs since the 30 series from NVIDIA and 6000 series from AMD. And I do try to test with upscaling and without upscaling, and oftentimes also at max settings, but also medium settings, so you can get a better idea of what the GPU is actually capable of in these games, rather than just trying to tax it as much as possible to get comparisons to other GPUs. I try to give you some idea of what they might be actually like to use. Anyway, that's what I've got for you guys today, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.